He was duct-taped, blinded, and left beside a worn-out suitcase on the edge of Route 66. No food, no water, just silence and loyalty. Everyone passed him by until a grieving old man with trembling hands stopped, a retired neurosurgeon facing his own ghosts, and a German shepherd guarding a child's final secret. What happened next will break your heart and then heal it. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I want to see how far Emily's voice still echoes. And if you believe that even broken souls can still protect, still love, hit that subscribe button. Because this isn't just a story, it's a promise that hope never dies. The Arizona sun had begun its slow descent, bleeding soft gold across the dry, rust-colored landscape of Flagstaff's outskirts. Heat still shimmered above the cracked pavement of Route 66, but the wind had cooled just enough to rustle the creosote bushes and send wisps of dust skimming across the roadside. Evening brought a tired hush to the world, the kind that only settles in places too long forgotten. Robert Langley pulled his aging blue Tacoma to the side of the road, right before the bend where the power lines dipped and rattled. At 69, Robert moved like someone carrying too many yesterdays, deliberate, careful, and never in a rush. His back had a slight curve to it, not just from years hunched over surgical tables, but from grief that had pressed him downward for over a decade. He wore a pressed flannel shirt, khaki trousers, and orthopedic boots with soles worn from habitual pacing. His hair, once dark and sharp, had surrendered entirely to white. So had his hands veined, knotted, and slightly trembling from both age and heart medication. He wasn't out here looking for anyone. Most Tuesdays he drove the old truck to the animal shelter near Walnut Canyon where he volunteered. But today, his route had changed on impulse, maybe divine, maybe not. He wasn't sure he still believed in those things. That's when he saw it. At first glance, it looked like a piece of trash beside a scuffed-up brown suitcase. But as he pulled closer, Robert's heart gave a strange thump. Lying beside that suitcase was a dog large, rigid, and too still. A German shepherd, unmistakable even beneath the dust and filth clinging to its fur. It wasn't just lying there. It was guarding. Robert stepped out. The scent of sun-baked rubber and dry earth stung his nostrils. He moved cautiously, his boots crunching softly in the gravel. The dog's head was wrapped in silver duct tape. 3 full turns around the skull, blinding it. Only its nose was exposed, twitching slightly as Robert approached. Its ears did not perk, it didn't growl or flinch, it just remained. Head resting on the suitcase like it was a lifeline. Robert dropped to one knee, the effort drawing a sharp breath from his lungs. "Jesus," he whispered. The tape had been wound tight. Whoever had done this had known how to restrain without killing. Cruelty masked in control. He didn't touch the dog. Not yet. He simply sat with it, minutes passing in a silence that felt sacred. The dog had a rough coat, black and tan, though most of the fur was so matted with dust and dried blood it looked gray. Ribs jutted through its sides like scaffolding left in a crumbling cathedral. Its paws, large and worn, were scabbed and raw. Despite it all, it held a soldier's pose, still, square, alert in a way that defied exhaustion. "You're trained," Robert murmured. "A working dog. You've known orders." He remembered a time when he used to command operating rooms with the same still authority. Precision, structure, silence under pressure. There was something familiar here. His eyes drifted to the suitcase. Old leather, the kind that once meant something. He didn't dare open it yet, not before helping this dog. Returning to his truck, Robert fetched his first aid kit and a bottle of water. Slowly, gently, he knelt again and wet a cloth. The dog flinched as the cloth touched its paw but didn't growl. It was the first sign of life acknowledgement, however small. "I'm gonna get you out of here," Robert said, voice steady, almost surgical. "You just hold on." The tape came off in 3 painful motions. The skin underneath was raw, patches of fur torn. The dog blinked as light hit its swollen eyes, amber, piercing, and far too human. Robert stared into those eyes, feeling the weight of unspoken things behind them. Not just pain, purpose. "Yeah," he whispered, "you've seen things too." It was only once the dog had water and shade that Robert dared check the suitcase. The zippers were stiff with rust, but they opened with effort. Inside were tattered toys, a pink hair clip shaped like a butterfly, and an old dog collar with a brass tag. He turned it over and read the inscription. Rocky, protector, always. The name hit him like a thunderclap. It was so ordinary, so American, so bold. But there was something deeper in it too, a resilience. A name you shout across backyards and dark nights. A name that fights back. He glanced at the dog. Rocky, huh? The ears flicked. That's your name, Robert said gently. Somebody gave that to you. Someone who knew what it meant. He looked at the tag again. Below the name was something etched in tiny letters, almost worn off. Keep him safe. He kept me safe. Robert felt the breath leave his lungs. His hand closed around the tag as if it were fragile glass. He didn't cry, not yet. But his throat closed in that particular way that comes before either breaking or surviving. He had known loss, but he had never seen loyalty like this. He didn't wait. With quiet determination, Robert scooped the dog into a blanket and gently lifted him into the passenger seat. Rocky didn't protest. He simply laid his head back onto the suitcase as the door closed beside him. As the truck rumbled back onto the road, Robert stole glances in the mirror. Rocky's eyes remained half open, watching the road ahead, alert, guarding, still not done. The shelter sat 15 minutes away. Robert didn't speak during the drive. He didn't need to. In the passenger seat sat a story wrapped in silence and scars, a story waiting to be told. And beside him sat Rocky, the duct-taped dog with a soldier's soul. The rescue center at Walnut Canyon was quiet that evening, with the hum of the air conditioner mingling with distant desert wind outside. The building, a converted ranger outpost from the 1970s, sat nestled at the edge of a sparse pine grove. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered with tired resolve as Robert Langley pushed open the front door with his shoulder, cradling Rocky gently in his arms. The dog remained still, wrapped in an old checkered blanket, his head resting on Robert's forearm and his eyes half closed but watchful. Behind the reception desk stood Jessica Mendez, the shelter's evening coordinator. A woman in her early 30s with warm cinnamon skin, sharp cheekbones, and a steady gaze that suggested she'd seen both the worst and best of people. Her dark curly hair was pulled into a no-nonsense bun, and her polo shirt, stitched with the rescue center's logo, was slightly dusted with fur. Jessica had the kind of compassion that came from exhaustion, not the dreamy kind of kindness, but the type forged from hard days and harder choices. She looked up, blinked twice, and stood from her stool. Robert, what in the world? Found him off 66, Robert said, his voice thin from the road. Duct tape over his eyes. He was guarding this. He gestured to the battered brown suitcase Robert had set down beside him. Jessica approached carefully, her boots barely making a sound on the linoleum. Her hands moved like a nurse's, gentle but certain, as she peeled back the blanket just enough to check Rocky's breathing and vitals. German Shepherd, maybe 6 years old, male, underfed, dehydrated, paws are raw, no microchip. She glanced up. You did right bringing him here. He's trained, Robert said. Disciplined. He didn't move an inch on the ride here. Eyes stay on the road like he's still on duty. Jessica nodded. A canine, maybe? Or a service animal. Some of them never stop working. They transferred Rocky to a padded kennel suite in the back, one reserved for trauma cases. Robert stayed nearby as Jessica moved to process intake paperwork. While she typed, Robert knelt by the suitcase, hesitated, then unzipped the main pocket. The musty scent of age and dust drifted out. Inside were 2 dog toys, a chewed-up stuffed turtle with one missing eye and a rope ball frayed at both ends. Beneath them lay a small pink hair clip, shaped like a butterfly, with a layer of grit clinging to the plastic. It looked like it had been loved, dropped, found again, and carried like treasure. He reached deeper, and his fingers brushed against paper. It was a child's drawing, crinkled, edges curled. The colors had faded, but the crayon lines were strong. 2 figures stood at the center, a little girl with a big smile and wild brown hair, and beside her, a large German shepherd with perked ears and a heart on his chest. They were holding hands, paw and palm, with a dark scribbled cloud above them labeled in messy block letters, Dad. Over their heads was a yellow sun with bold rays and the words, Best friends forever. Robert felt his chest tighten as he stared at the image. The innocence of the lines clashed with the weight behind them. Taped to the back was a note, written in faint pencil by a child's hand. "If I'm not here, please take care of Rocky. He kept me safe. Now it's his turn." He didn't realize Jessica was beside him until she placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "That came from the suitcase?" she asked. Robert nodded. Her name was Emily. "Whoever she was," Jessica murmured, "she loved him enough to leave him everything." Robert's voice came out hoarse. "It's not right. A child shouldn't have to prepare a goodbye like that." Jessica stayed silent for a beat, then sat on the floor beside him, legs crossed like a kid in school. "You know, when I was 11, my mother left me a bag of peanut butter crackers and a note that said, 'I love you, but I have to go.' She never came back. People do horrible things, but sometimes the ones left behind still find ways to love anyway." Robert turned to look at her, surprised. He had never known that about Jessica. She always carried herself with strength, but never wore her scars. "I think he was her anchor," she added. "This dog, Rocky, he was more than a pet. He was her shield." Robert looked at the dog, now curled on the soft bedding through the glass panel, eyes shut but his body still angled protectively toward the suitcase. He ran his finger across the name written in crayon beneath the girl's figure. Emily. And next to the dog, Rocky. "Rocky," he said softly. "The name suits him." "Why do you say that?" Jessica asked. Robert smiled faintly, though his eyes shimmered. "Rocky's the kind of name you give to something that's taken a beating and still stands. Something or someone you believe in even when no one else does." Jessica stood and offered her hand to help him up. "Then let's believe in him, Robert. We owe Emily that much." As Robert rose, his knee cracked audibly, but he didn't complain. He slipped the drawing into a plastic sleeve and gently placed it on the shelf above Rocky's kennel. That night, as the last light left the desert sky and shadows crept across the pines, Rocky stirred. Just a twitch, just a shift of weight. But his nose turned toward the drawing and his breathing slowed, and for the first time in perhaps days, he slept. The following afternoon brought with it a brittle sunlight and a cool breeze that rustled the pine branches outside Walnut Canyon Animal Rescue. Inside, the air carried the faint smells of bleach and kibble, interspersed with the occasional bark echoing through the narrow hallways. Rocky lay quietly in his kennel, head resting on his paws, the drawing of Emily and the butterfly hair clip now tucked neatly in a plastic sleeve beside him on a nearby shelf. He hadn't eaten much, but his eyes had grown more alert, scanning each figure who passed as if searching for someone he couldn't name. Jessica was filling out intake forms when the front door opened and the bell above it jingled. She glanced up, instantly straightening when she saw the visitors walk in. "Good afternoon," she said warmly. Stepping through the doorway was Grace Campbell, a woman in her mid-30s with soft auburn hair tied in a loose ponytail and eyes that had the weary shine of someone constantly navigating emotional terrain. She wore a pale green cardigan over a fitted gray blouse, jeans, and a pair of low-heeled boots that clicked against the floor. Though not tall, Grace carried herself with deliberate calm, each step, each glance, controlled. Her shoulders were slightly hunched, a subtle giveaway of someone who once tried very hard and failed more than she let on. Beside her was her husband, James Campbell, a tall, broad-shouldered man with neatly combed chestnut hair and rectangular glasses. He was quiet, protective hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the room like he was already calculating escape routes. His button-down shirt was tucked perfectly, and his wedding ring had a habit of catching the light as he fidgeted with it unconsciously. But the soul of the scene walked between them. Lily Campbell, 6 years old with wavy light brown hair falling just past her shoulders, walked silently. She wore a pink hooded sweater over navy leggings, and her small hands clutched the edges of her mother's cardigan, like she was clinging to a lifeline. Her eyes, hazel and enormous, didn't blink often. They absorbed everything but revealed nothing. Grace's voice was soft but firm. "We called earlier. You said you had a few older dogs who might be a good match for a quiet home?" Jessica nodded. "You're here for Lily, right?" James answered. "Yes. She hasn't spoken in over a year. Since..." He trailed off. Grace finished the sentence. "Since the accident." Jessica said nothing but nodded again. She didn't need the details. She saw them in Lily's stillness, in Grace's tight smile, and James's fidgeting fingers. "Follow me," she said gently. They walked past the front desk, through the main hallway. As they passed the glass panel kennels, dogs barked, jumped, spun in hope or panic. Lily didn't flinch. She didn't even turn her head. Then they reached the last enclosure tucked in a quieter corner. Jessica stopped and gestured. "This is Rocky." Robert, sitting in the adjacent observation room with a clipboard, looked up. He hasn't moved much since yesterday. Sleeps lightly, watches everything. Inside the kennel, Rocky was lying down, his body still but not slack. His eyes opened slowly at the sound of footsteps. His gaze landed directly on Lily. Jessica knelt beside the glass. He was found alone on Route 66. No one's claimed him. But there was a note, a child's drawing. It seems he belonged to a little girl before. Grace's face softened. "Really?" Jessica nodded. Lily stepped closer, pressing her palms against the glass. Rocky didn't stir. His ears twitched slightly, one torn and scarred tilted forward just a little. "Can we?" Grace asked. Jessica unlatched the door. "You can step inside, but let Lily go first. Let them see each other." Grace hesitated, then looked at Lily and gave the smallest of nods. And then, for the first time since entering the building, Lily moved on her own. She released her mother's sweater, stepped toward the open door, and passed through the threshold of the kennel. Robert held his breath. She stood still. Rocky lifted his head. For a second, nothing moved. Then, Lily crouched slowly, eye level with Rocky, and reached into her sweater pocket. She pulled out a single crayon. It was broken, blue, worn to a stub. She didn't offer it. She just held it up, like an offering to a forgotten god. And then she spoke. A whisper. A tremor. "Rocky." The dog blinked. Then, slowly, as if moved by something older than command, Rocky scooted forward on his belly, inch by inch, until his snout was just beneath her outstretched hand. He sniffed the crayon, then rested his head in her lap. A silence fell across the room, deep, sacred, heavy. Grace gasped. James put his hand to his mouth. Lily looked up at her parents. "He's mine," she said. 2 words. Her first in 14 months. Grace collapsed to her knees, arms wrapped around her daughter and Rocky both. Tears fell without sound. James sank beside them, resting a trembling hand on Rocky's back. Jessica turned away, wiping at her eyes. Robert, in the adjacent room, closed his clipboard and leaned back in his chair. "I guess he's still on duty," he whispered. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, rattling the dry pine needles against the windows. Inside, Rocky's tail wagged once. It was well past sunset when the shelter began to quiet. Most of the volunteers had gone home, and the last few dogs had been fed and taken outside for their nightly walk. The hum of overhead lights now competed only with the occasional bark from deeper inside the kennels. In a small back office filled with outdated filing cabinets and posters about proper pet nutrition, Robert Langley sat hunched over a cluttered desk. Before him lay the old suitcase, the same one Rocky had guarded with his life. Rocky was resting nearby, still in his observation kennel, head down but eyes half-lidded and alert. Lily had left just an hour earlier, carried out gently in her father's arms after falling asleep with Rocky's head on her lap. Grace had stayed behind just long enough to thank Robert again, her voice catching when she said, "I think you gave us back our daughter." He didn't know how to reply to that. Now alone in the quiet, Robert's fingers traced the seams of the suitcase one more time. Something still felt off. The inner lining bulged slightly, as though it had been tampered with. He tugged at the loose fabric along the corner and found a tear in the stitching, small, intentional. Sliding 2 fingers inside, he pulled out a thin black USB stick no larger than a house key. It was scuffed and taped with pink glittery hearts, likely added by a child's hand. Jessica returned just then, a steaming mug of chamomile in her hands. "You're still here?" Robert held up the USB. "Found this, hidden in the lining." She set the mug down and raised her brows. "Let's see what's on it." They moved to the older of the 2 shelter computers, a bulky desktop humming with age. Jessica inserted the drive. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, a series of video files loaded on screen, each labeled in childish handwriting. "Me and Rocky," "Room 4," "Bad Day," "Kitchen Night," and finally, "If I'm Gone." Jessica clicked on the first. The footage was grainy and dim. A little girl, Emily, unmistakably sat cross-legged on a thin mattress with Rocky lying beside her. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "Hi, this is Rocky. He's my best friend. I feed him when Daddy forgets. He likes peanut butter more than kibble." Robert exhaled, barely realizing he'd been holding his breath. Jessica stared at the screen, lips pressed together. The second video was darker. Emily stood in a narrow hallway, pointing the camera through a crack in the bedroom door. "Daddy's yelling again. Rocky knows when to hide, but he never leaves me." In the background, muffled shouting grew louder, then suddenly a thud. Emily jumped, and the camera went black. Jessica clicked on the third. This time, Rocky stood between Emily and a towering man's shadow in the doorway. The man raised a belt. Rocky growled a low, thunderous sound, and the man hesitated, cursed, then walked away. The video cut abruptly. Jessica closed her eyes. "He saved her," Robert nodded slowly. "Over and over again?" Then came the final file. It was dated nearly a year ago. Emily sat in the corner of a small, dimly lit room, likely a basement, judging from the cinder block walls and a single bare bulb above. She looked thinner, her cheeks pale, but her eyes were steady. "If you're seeing this, it means Rocky made it," she said quietly. "And I didn't." Robert felt something collapse inside him. Emily continued. "Rocky kept me safe when nobody else did. He stayed when others ran. I tried to run with him once, but Daddy found us. After that, I stopped trying. I knew maybe Rocky would get out one day even if I couldn't. If you have him now, please let him tell my story. I don't want to disappear." There was a pause. Then she whispered, "Tell them I wasn't just a kid who vanished. I had a name. I had a dog who loved me." The screen went black. Jessica wiped at her eyes with the heel of her palm. She was braver than most adults I've met. Robert turned to look at Rocky, now asleep under a soft fleece blanket with his name tag cleaned and shining faintly. She gave him a mission, and he held on to it. Jessica moved to a small drawer and pulled out a CD burner. "I'll make copies. We need to show this to someone. This can't stay here." Robert nodded. "Police, a child protection officer, maybe the media. Someone needs to know." Then he added, almost to himself, "She said he should tell the story, but maybe it's me who has to speak for him." Jessica glanced at him curiously. "I was a surgeon," he murmured. "Emily was one of mine." "You operated on her?" Jessica asked, stunned. Robert didn't answer. Instead, he stared down at the USB now resting beside the butterfly hair clip and whispered, "She remembered me." The courthouse in downtown Flagstaff was an aging sandstone building with whitewashed columns and arched windows that looked as if they had seen too many winters and too few reasons to celebrate justice. That morning, the Arizona sky was colorless, a dull sheet of overcast clouds casting long shadows over the parking lot. Robert Langley sat in his car for a full 5 minutes before stepping out. The USB drive clutched tight in his hand like a lifeline. His coat, gray wool, still held the scent of Rocky's fur, a quiet, grounding presence he needed more than he admitted. The hearing was scheduled in Courtroom B. The case wasn't criminal, at least not yet. It was a dispute of custody, a man claiming ownership over a dog that he said was his family's, and a group of strangers arguing that the dog belonged to a little girl who could no longer speak for herself. Inside, Judge Patricia Keene presided from the bench. A woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a chignon and lines carved deep into her olive-toned face, Patricia was known for her sharp mind and even sharper memory. She wore no makeup, only thin glasses that she pushed up now and then when she grew suspicious. Her voice was firm, her courtroom notoriously quiet. Robert sat beside Grace Campbell, who had offered to represent her family's interest. Grace had done her research. Though she'd left her teaching job years ago, her intellect remained intact. She wore a navy blue blazer and minimal jewelry, confident but not flashy. James sat behind them with Lily, who now clutched Rocky's leash gently. Rocky lay at their feet, calm and unbothered by the crowd around him. His eyes remained fixed on the doorway. Then that doorway opened, and Derek Masters stepped in. Derek was in his early 40s, lean and sharp-angled, with slicked-back blonde hair and a smug smile that seemed permanently etched on his face. He wore an expensive gray suit, the kind meant to impress people who'd never been hurt by him. His attorney, Brent Hollinger, was a younger man, fresh-faced, clearly nervous. carrying a stack of disorganized papers under one arm. Judge Keene's gaze swept the room and landed first on Rocky. "Is the dog staying in the room?" Grace stood. "Yes, Your Honor. He's a therapy animal for our daughter, and he's part of this dispute." "Fine," the judge said. "As long as he doesn't speak, he can stay." A few people chuckled. Robert didn't. The opening statements were standard. Brent claimed that Derek had owned the dog since it was a pup, had papers to prove it, and wanted his property returned. Grace countered with the USB, the evidence of abuse, and the testimony of a child long gone but still speaking through video. Judge Keene adjusted her glasses. "Let's begin with the documents." Brent presented what he called proof of ownership. A purchase receipt, a veterinary form from 3 years ago, and a photo of Derek with Rocky as a young pup. Grace examined the papers, then calmly replied, "All dated before Emily's name appears on anything. This only proves he bought a dog, not that he treated it as anything more than a tool." Robert asked for permission to speak. "Dr. Langley," the judge said, "you're listed as a witness?" "Yes, Your Honor." He stood slowly, his back stiff. "I'm also the surgeon who operated on Emily Masters." Gasps rippled in the courtroom. "I was brought in under consultation 2 years ago," Robert continued. "Emily had a rare brain tumor. I performed her surgery. She didn't survive." Derek stood up. "He botched it," he shouted. "He killed my daughter." Judge Keene banged the gavel once. "Sit down, Mr. Masters." Robert's voice trembled slightly, but he held firm. "There were complications unforeseen, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I received a message from Emily after her death." He held up the USB. "She left this for whoever found Rocky. Testimony, videos. She wanted the world to know what really happened in that house." Grace approached the bench, handing over a prepared DVD copy with labeled timestamps. Judge Keene motioned to her clerk to dim the lights. The courtroom fell silent as the first video played. Emily's face filled the screen, pale, tired, but brave. "This is Rocky," she said. "He's my best friend. He kept me safe when Daddy got angry." Another clip played, Rocky shielding Emily from a raised hand. A third, Emily whispering, "If I'm not here, please take care of him." Derek's face went white. Brent tried to object but was waved off. Judge Keene turned to Brent. "Do you have a response to this?" Brent sputtered. "The videos could be edited. They aren't time-stamped. We don't know if they're authentic." "They match dates in the medical record," Grace interjected calmly. "They coincide with when Emily was being treated, when she was scheduled to be in recovery, but instead she was recording abuse." The judge nodded, slow and deliberate. "Mr. Masters, did you ever report Emily missing?" Derek stammered. She ran away. Yet you never contacted authorities, didn't post signs, didn't file anything, and now, 2 years later, you're here asking for her dog?" "I want what's mine," he snapped. The judge leaned back. "No, you want to erase what's left of her." Her gaze shifted back to Rocky. "And he didn't let you." For a long moment no one spoke. Then Lily stood up. Her small voice cut through the silence. "He's not your dog. He's mine now." Robert turned, his throat thick. Judge Keene looked down at Lily and smiled faintly. "And I believe you." She turned back to Derek. "Motion denied. Ownership of the dog will remain with the Campbell family. This court reserves the right to forward this evidence to the district attorney for further investigation into allegations of child abuse and neglect." The gavel came down. Rocky lifted his head and slowly wagged his tail. A week after the court hearing, the world outside the Campbell home felt warmer. Spring was slipping softly into Flagstaff. The morning sun fell gently through budding elm trees, casting a honeyed light across the modest one-story house on the edge of Aspen Street. Birds chattered somewhere in the neighbor's sycamore. Inside, laughter stirred, not loud, but present, real. Robert Langley sat at the kitchen table, his fingers loosely wrapped around a mug of herbal tea that Grace had brewed for him. It was the same mug he'd used 3 visits in a row now, with the faded words, "World's Okayest Grandpa," printed on it. Lily had insisted he keep using it. He hadn't objected. The kitchen was painted a soft peach, cluttered with magnets and drawings, some curled with age, others still wet from watercolor. Rocky lay beneath the table, his head resting across Lily's bare feet as she colored at the opposite end. His coat had begun to regain its shine thanks to better food and daily brushing. He no longer watched every doorway. He simply listened. That was enough. Lily, 6 years old, now wore her hair in two slightly uneven braids, each fastened with mismatched clips, a pink butterfly and a green turtle. Her cheeks had gained a flush of health. Her voice, once lost to silence, returned in short bursts. Fragments of thoughts, quiet songs, whispered questions she only asked Robert or Rocky, sometimes both. Today she said nothing at all. Instead, she was drawing. Grace entered the room with her usual graceful precision, her auburn hair tied back in a low bun, cheeks lightly dusted with flour. She had been baking apple bread by the scent of it. "She's been working on that since breakfast," Grace whispered as she set down a tray. "Wouldn't let me see." Robert smiled, watching Lily's brow furrow in concentration. "She takes her time. She gets that from her mother." Grace looked surprised, then touched her heart. "Thank you." James walked in moments later, tall and steady as ever, his button-down sleeves rolled past his elbows. "Hey, kiddo," he said to Lily. "Time to show him?" Lily nodded once and slid off her chair, carrying the drawing with both hands like something sacred. She padded over to Robert and gently set the paper on the table in front of him. It took him a moment. The page was filled with color. In the center, Rocky sat between three people, Lily on his right, holding a crayon, Emily on his left, her figure outlined in blue with glowing yellow around her head. Robert stood behind them all, hands outstretched like a guardian. From each person extended a thin golden thread, meeting in the middle of Rocky's chest in a shining knot. Above the image, written in bold, childlike handwriting, were the words, "The people who keep each other safe." Robert didn't speak. His throat tightened, his vision blurred. Lily tapped the picture with one small finger. "That's you," she said quietly. "And that's Emily. She's part of us too." He nodded, unable to find any words. The picture glowed in the soft kitchen light. He traced the golden thread with one calloused finger, stopping at the heart of Rocky, where every line converged. Grace placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezing gently. "She's never drawn her like that before. We didn't prompt her." James added, "We didn't even mention Emily." Robert finally found his voice, hoarse and rough. "She's here," he said. "That thread. It's real. You just have to know how to see it." Lily crawled onto his lap without asking, her arms winding around his neck. Rocky stood, stretched, and nudged his head under Robert's free hand. And Robert, who had once held dying children in sterile rooms, who had closed his own daughter's eyes and folded up dreams into cardboard boxes, let himself cry. Later that night, long after the apple bread was eaten and James had read Lily to sleep, Robert stood in the guest room, staring at the little framed picture on the nightstand. It was a photo he had brought on his second visit. His daughter Anna, smiling in a field of sunflowers, her hair blown sideways by wind. It had traveled with him everywhere. Now, quietly, he opened his wallet. Inside was a copy of that same photo, worn at the edges. He removed it. Behind it, folded neatly, he placed Lily's drawing. Then he slid the wallet shut again, the old picture now replaced. He didn't throw Anna's photo away. He placed it in a wooden box with the name Langley etched faintly on top, a box he hadn't opened in 5 years. He didn't lock it. He didn't cry. He simply walked back down the hall, where Rocky lay curled at Lily's door, and sat beside him on the floor. "Thank you," he whispered to the dog, "for carrying her story, for not letting go." Rocky leaned his weight against him and exhaled. Outside, the wind whispered in the trees, and somewhere in that quiet night, the thread held. The days following this court ruling unfolded with a strange blend of quiet relief and emotional exhaustion. The Campbell home, once shrouded in apprehension, now pulsed gently with a sense of restored normalcy. Rocky, now officially and legally theirs, had settled into his new role with quiet devotion. He rarely left Lily's side, sleeping at her feet during the day, curled by her bed at night. His presence, more than a comfort, it was a shield. But justice had not ended at the courtroom door. In the Flagstaff Police Department's Crimes Against Children Division, Detective Carla Jensen had taken over the case against Derek Masters. A seasoned investigator in her late 40s with a no-nonsense attitude, Carla stood at an even 5'6" with sharp gray eyes and short-cropped hair that framed her angular face. Years on the force had given her a reputation for cutting through excuses like wire through butter. She had reviewed the video evidence from Emily's USB stick 6 times, each time pausing longer on the bruises, the fear, the small, defiant voice of a girl who knew her own fate and prepared others for it. It was her report that led to Derek's arrest. He was taken in without drama, smiling even as the cuffs clicked, as if he still believed he'd walk free. His lawyer, Brent Hollinger, had already resigned, citing ethical misalignment. Local news began to circulate details of the case, painting Derek not as a grieving father, but as a man who'd manipulated tragedy into a personal crusade. Meanwhile, Robert Langley stood in the foyer of St. Jude's Pediatric Hospital, the same hospital where he had once scrubbed in for surgeries that lasted into the early hours of morning. The building hadn't changed much, still too white, still echoing with distant cries and nervous laughter. The woman greeting him at the front desk was Marianne Tooley, a nurse in her early 60s with auburn hair streaked in silver, tucked into a ponytail. She had a maternal presence about her, the kind who always knew when a child was faking a stomachache. "Dr. Langley," she said, eyes widening. "It's been, my God, 8 years?" He gave a small nod, his posture straight despite the fatigue in his shoulders. "I'm not here to operate," he said quickly. "Just to help, if you'll let me." Marianne studied him for a moment, then smiled. "We always needed more hearts. Yours was never in question." Robert's application for part-time volunteer work had already cleared background checks. He would join as a patient family liaison, someone who spoke with parents, interpreted medical language into human words, and sat quietly beside those whose children couldn't speak for themselves. That afternoon, in a sunlit corner of the hospital's reading room, Robert helped an 8-year-old boy named Marcus fold paper cranes. Marcus had leukemia and a mother who didn't speak much English. Robert didn't need to say much. He let the paper do the talking. For the first time in years, he did not feel like he was walking backward. Back at the Campbell house, Lily sat with Grace on the porch, coloring with fresh chalk on the concrete. A large yellow sun, a crooked tree, and 3 figures appeared: herself, Rocky, and Dr. Grandpa, as she had taken to calling Robert, complete with white hair and a giant coffee mug. "Do you think Rocky remembers Emily all the time?" Lily asked softly. Grace paused, brushing a strand of hair behind Lily's ear. "I think he does. And I think he's teaching us how to remember her too." Just then, James pulled into the driveway, stepping out with an envelope in hand. "It's from the state," he said, waving it. "Final documentation, custody's finalized." Grace exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding. James opened the envelope, and inside was a single sentence, stamped in ink and embossed: "Rocky, legal property of the Campbell family. But to them, he was never property, he was family." Later that night, Robert visited again, bringing a gift wrapped in blue paper. Inside was a photo frame, 4 sections joined together. One slot held a picture of Emily, carefully restored from the USB footage. Another showed Lily and Rocky from their first day together. A third held the golden thread drawing. And the last was a photo Robert had never shown before, a candid snapshot of him and Emily in the hospital garden during recovery, her hand resting on his. "I never told anyone I kept that," Robert admitted. "It was the only picture we ever took together. I thought it hurt too much to look at it. Now I know it hurt more to hide it." Grace took the frame gently and set it on the mantel. Rocky, as if sensing the moment, rose from his spot and nudged his head against Robert's leg. "I know, boy," Robert whispered. "We're not done, but we're getting there." Outside, the desert wind stirred again. A golden thread, invisible but unbroken, stretched from the past into the present and looped softly into a future no longer burdened by silence. 6 months later, the trees lining the sidewalk of Lincoln Elementary swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves bright with early autumn hues. The old brick school, nestled in the heart of the neighborhood, had taken on new life with the start of the year. Recess whistles, the slap of jump ropes on pavement, and the high-pitched laughter of children echoed through the morning air. But today, something special was happening inside the library, a place usually reserved for quiet. In the center of the room, a circle of beanbags and floor cushions had been arranged with care. The shelves had been pushed back to create space, and paper leaves decorated the walls, each one hand-drawn by a student. On a whiteboard, in neat marker, someone had written, "Welcome Rocky and Lily, our reading friends." Lily Campbell, now just past her 7th birthday, stood near the center, a little taller than before, her light brown hair in 2 smooth ponytails. She wore a soft lavender sweater with tiny yellow stars stitched along the hem, and on her back was a backpack shaped like a fox. At her feet sat Rocky calm, poised, his glossy black and tan coat gleaming in the library light. He wore a special blue vest labeled Therapy Dog, Please Pet Gently. Their therapist, Ms. Kendall Moore, hovered nearby, a woman in her early 40s with a kind face and expressive hands. She had long, sandy blonde hair she often wore loose, and a voice as soft as turning pages. Ms. Moore had been one of the first to suggest that Lily and Rocky might benefit not just from therapy, but from sharing their healing with others. And it worked. Every Thursday morning, Lily and Rocky visited the school. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. The children gathered around, reading their favorite books aloud, while Rocky rested his head on someone's knee or simply listened, eyes half-lidded, tail occasionally thumping. Children who had once been shy or disruptive found a strange calm in the dog's presence, and Lily, who once couldn't say a word, now introduced herself with a soft but steady voice. "Hi, this is Rocky. He's very brave." Robert Langley watched from the hallway, leaning slightly on the doorframe. He was dressed neatly in dark slacks and a light blue button-down, his white hair combed back. A man of few words lately, he simply smiled, arms folded. Around his neck hung a lanyard with a volunteer badge and the label, Mr. Robert, School Visitor. Lily had insisted he come today. "They think he's my hero," she whispered. "But you were mine first." Grace and James stood at the opposite end of the room, whispering with the principal, their faces beaming with quiet pride. Grace, dressed in a tailored navy blouse and silver earrings, now taught part-time at the school, again reading comprehension for grades 1 through 3. James, ever steady, had taken a promotion but still made time to volunteer during events involving Lily and Rocky. He was the silent engine behind the scenes, coordinating everything, never asking for recognition. On a table nearby sat a small framed photograph, 4 figures, Lily with Rocky, Emily's image edited in like a ghost of love, and Robert standing tall with a hand on Rocky's head. Beneath the photo was a quote in golden script: "To protect, to heal, to remember." Later that afternoon, as school let out, the Campbells and Robert walked home together beneath an amber sky. Rocky walked without a leash, never straying from Lily's side. They stopped by a small cafe on Maple Avenue, their new ritual apple juice for Lily, black coffee for Robert, a blueberry muffin split between them, and a treat for Rocky. "Did you see Mason pet him today?" Lily asked excitedly. "He never pets dogs." "I saw," Robert said, taking a slow sip. "You helped him." "No," Lily said, looking down at Rocky. "He did." Grace smiled gently. "Both of you did." Just then, a familiar voice called out from across the street. It was Nora Whitman, a local reporter from the community paper, a spry woman in her early 50s with curly gray hair and a camera always slung around her neck. She waved as she approached. "Sorry to interrupt, but, Robert, may I steal a moment?" He nodded. She turned on a small voice recorder. "This story, it's grown so much. People across the state are talking about it. Survivors, parents, teachers. The idea of a child, a dog, and a grieving man changing each other's lives." Robert looked at Lily, who offered a small nod. "We didn't change each other," he said. "We just reminded each other that it's okay to try again." Nora smiled. "And what would you say to people who've lost something? Or someone?" Robert didn't hesitate. "You're never too broken to be useful, and you're never too late to be loved." That night, in the Campbell living room, Lily curled up on the couch beside Rocky, watching a movie while Grace baked cookies. Robert sat in the armchair, a book unopened in his lap. On the mantel sat a new edition, a tiny gold plaque engraved with, "For Emily, for all the quiet voices that still need to be heard." Outside, the world remained imperfect, but inside this home, there was peace. And at the center of it all, a dog who once guarded a suitcase in the desert now guarded something far greater, a family. Sometimes, God doesn't answer our prayers in thunder or fire, but in the quiet footsteps of a dog, the whisper of a child, or the outstretched hand of someone who still believes in second chances. Rocky was more than a dog. He was a miracle with 4 paws and a mission, a reminder that healing doesn't come all at once. It comes in threads, golden and unseen, connecting the broken pieces of our lives. In a world that can feel so loud, so unforgiving, this story reminds us of the silent power of loyalty, love, and grace. Emily's voice may have gone quiet, But through Rocky, it found its way back into the world. Through Lily, it grew stronger. Through Robert, it healed. And through all of them, we're reminded that faith, even when fragile, is never wasted. If you believe that no soul is ever too broken to be loved, if you believe that God sends angels in fur coats, if you believe in redemption, miracles, and the unseen hands of grace, share this story with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below and type Amen if this touched your heart. Subscribe to our channel for more true stories of healing, courage, and compassion. May God bless you and your loved ones. And may you never forget, sometimes the smallest voice is the one that saves us all.